Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Increasing your happiness every single day is not only an option, it's a necessity. Think about this. If you focused on becoming 1% happier each day between now and the end of the year, you could be over 200% happier. This is a massive jump. So today, you and I are taking a one-on-one deep dive into happiness. Some of the things that really get in the way of our happiness, and we talk about how to shift and define what happiness means to us, not happiness by the standards we've been taught or others define it. So this is a conversation that puts happiness in tangible, reachable terms that work for you. So let's dive right in. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. Okay, ladies, when was the last time you asked yourself, am I really happy? It's probably been a while. I know I personally ask myself this every 5 to 6 months so that I can evaluate and really honor where I am. But most of us do not actively ask that question. Am I really happy? And since our focus is to create happiness, I thought we would start with, what gets in the way of our happiness. Then we're going to talk about the definition of our personal happiness and give you some ways to increase that happy feeling and really understand that there are two forms of happiness, at least from my perspective. And I divide those into situational happiness and genuine, true happiness. Genuine happiness is that feeling, that internal push, pull, nudge, nod, whatever you want to call it, that tells you I'm present, I'm aware, I'm soulfully connected, I'm aligned, I've hit the 5 masters of my life, and I'm doing really well. That's true, genuine happiness. Those 5 masters, again, especially if you're new around here, are the things that really guide and lead our lives, the 5 areas that we really hit almost every single day: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and financial health and well-being. And in order to truly be happy in that genuine happiness, we have to understand what happiness really means to us. Now, let's go back for just a second and talk about situational happiness. Situational happiness is really those moments that make you feel happy, but are not long lasting. And it's really interesting because these can even be massive movements and moments in our lives. A lot of women will describe their wedding as a situational happy moment. I'm happy it happened. It was a situation. I loved every experience within it. But that happiness sort of finds a dovetail to go down and we move on to something else. It's situational. The birth of children for some people is situational. Doesn't mean that there's not genuine happiness within the human that was brought into the world. It just means the event itself is situational. If you can frame that in your mind for your thought process, what happens is we begin to question and sort of use situational or genuine happiness as a measuring stick. Right? Is this a moment that I'm going to remember forever, take in and use as my prosperity, abundance, alignment, standard for the rest of my life? Or is this more of a blessed moment that I love that can make me feel much more grounded in gratitude and really feeling my life? And, neither of them are wrong. Both of them are right. It's just a matter of understanding. And so, in that idea of understanding, let's talk about what gets in the way, what keeps happiness at bay. And it's very interesting because the first answer that most people give when I ask that question is trauma. They say, well, trauma keeps me from happiness. And in some ways, that's true, but in other ways, it's not. Because trauma is a background, right? It's something that really does guide our behaviors a lot of times. It guides our emotions, especially if it's unhealed. But it's not something that is going to destroy happiness altogether unless we've put behaviors in place because of the trauma, right? Some people experience trauma and they're able to have this fortitude to just move through it. That's not everyone, of course, but many people do have that experience. And what I'm really talking about here are these very simple behaviors that tank our happiness, that get in the way, that really become the virus in our brain, in our emotions, in the five masters, and most certainly in our behavior and our life that really can own us. So the very first one, because we're diving right into this, because I want to give you that ability to build that greater expression, that 1% more each day. And the first one that I really want to address is complaining. It's so interesting because so many of us have complaints and we don't even realize that we spend a lot of time verbalizing what's not working for us. And every time we verbalize a complaint, we really are saying, this doesn't work for me, and yet this is my focus. What's even more interesting is that your brain does not have a filter for positive or negative. If you've listened to the podcast for quite some time, you understand this. We've walked through it many times. And so every time we have a complaint and we're verbalizing it, we're basically telling the brain, this is the standard in which I want to feel and live. And it doesn't know positive or negative. It just knows what you feed it. So every time you complain, you really work to steal your focus and your happiness. You let it go. You say, you know what? I'm going to keep this at bay. And what we have to do is begin to listen to ourselves. What are we complaining about? Are we complaining about our spouses, our partners, our jobs, our children, our lifestyle, our choices? What is the complaint? For every complaint, there is a solution, a resolution, but we have to be willing to stop and listen. Why do I feel this negative undertone? Why do I feel this experience so heavily? And can I change it by simply asking myself, what is the problem? Right? If I asked myself what the problem might be and I was able to quickly come to a solution, wouldn't that increase my happiness? Wouldn't that give me a goal and a mindset to know that I have the ability to make change? And change allows us to know that happiness is continual and possible for us. And not situational happiness, but instead genuine happiness. The situation may be causing the complaint, but the outcome, knowing that you can change whatever is necessary, creates that true and genuine happiness. Now, the next one that I see so often, so often, is when people have unrealistic goals that keep them from happy experiences, right? So that more defined situational happiness and long-term, true, genuine happiness. I'm not going to lie to you. So many people love to ruminate. They love to overthink. They love to overdo. We experience burnout, and therefore we cannot thrive in happiness. And if we're not hitting our goals or feeling successful in our day-to-day, the todays, then we don't feel happy. So we have to really look at what we're doing in our daily life, the rumbling, right? The undertone. If we're always chasing big things that aren't tangible, if we're always putting our happiness on the back burner, if we're always saying, I will be happy when X, Y, and Z happens, there's no way for us to feel genuine happiness. We live in situational happiness only. And again, that doesn't feel sustainable. It feels like a very small movement. So, how do we change that? How can we increase that 1% happiness? We set reasonable, bite sized goals. We keep them so simple and obtainable that we realize our genuine happiness is very much directed by our doings. And we're not supposed to really only place our happiness in our outcomes. But many people who haven't gone on a healing journey or don't really actively learn about themselves, they're not into self development, they're not into personal intentionality, don't know how to do it any other way, right? So it's important to be able to know the difference and know how to get yourself into that genuine stage. Now, the third thing, it's this need to impress or be validated by others. And guess what? It's a waste of energy and any potential long-term genuine happiness. I want to remind you, you may have heard me say this before, but what is an opinion? An opinion is how someone else would do something if they were in your shoes. We spend so much time worried about what other people may do or say or would think. And it's such a waste of time. It's such a waste of our happiness, of our potential. Because what we're saying is we don't trust ourselves enough to be happy and to make our own choices that work for us. We're worried about the validation of someone else that will always trip us up. And so we have to start shifting our thinking to ask ourselves, am I doing this to make other people happy, or am I making myself happy with my choices? When we realize that other people's opinions do nothing for our happiness, we tend to let them go. It's so very important. We often do things because that's the way we were taught, because that's what's most comfortable. But we also have to understand that no matter how hard we try, we're never going to measure up to someone else's definition, their ruler, whatever it is that they're putting in front of us, because they are not the ones doing the action. You are. So if you want to be 1% happier, you have to drop this need to impress and lean into, will this make me truly happy if I engage in this moment in this way? That's the question. Now, the fourth one is the one that I often see women most come into my office, and it's because that inner mean girl talks really nasty to you. It's that negative self-talk. It's that girl that will not shut the hell up, right? She's got an opinion about everything, and yet she lives inside of your head rent-free with no eviction notice, right? If someone was bashing you, if someone was doubting you, if someone was talking all kinds of trash about you, would you spend so much time validating their ugly mistruth? Probably not, right? You could look at it and say, that doesn't belong to me. That's not how I truly feel. And yet we allow ourselves to be very combative with ourselves. We allow that inner mean girl to talk to us like we aren't our own best friend. And honestly, it tanks our happiness. Much like complaining, when we focus on that inner conversation and it is a negative one, we tank. It's impossible to even feel situationally happy because that mean girl is always voicing a negative, and our happiness will always fall short. So we begin to question, is this my truth? Is this the voice that I really want to listen to? Is this mean girl trying to get my attention and she doesn't deserve it, and therefore I'm not giving it to her? These are things that really have us falling short in genuine happiness, in being 1% or 20% or 50% happier each day because we're listening to something within us that is not true. Now, this next one is also something that I see a lot of. And in fact, it's more of a virus than the negative self talk, because at least with the negative self talk, we can identify it. We can actually see it. We can break it down. We can look at it from 52 different angles. But this one is a little bit more, let's say, difficult to see. And it's always needing to be comfortable and resisting change. Change is going to come. Change actually is a directive of happiness. If we look at change as a way to know that something more is going to come for us, then we allow change to happen and we allow for our happiness to be in full exposure, right? We're not hiding ourselves. We're not hiding our behaviors. We're not worried about what may be, but instead we just allow what is to be. That is a part of happiness. If we resist something or we fight something, we can't enjoy the moment as it is. That means that we've connected to this thing, this emotion, this event, this person in a way that is not healthy or serving us. And that can never produce genuine and sometimes not even situational happiness. Enjoying what is the baseline to happiness. Being present is the baseline to happiness. So we have to get into a place where you're aware of the here and now. That's where you're living. That's where you're making decisions from. That's where you are making the most impact. 1% happier comes from being in the present moment. Now, number 6. This is a big one for a lot of people, and it most certainly is something that will keep happiness at bay immediately. And it really speaks to what we just said. And it's spending too much time in the past, something that's already gone, or the future, which has not yet been developed. Remember, I just said happiness is built in the here and now. The next one really goes back to that inner mean girl and the life that we're not concentrating on or accepting or living in the here and now. And it is a lack of gratitude. How can you really be happy if you don't focus on what you already have? How can you be happy if you don't show appreciation for what's in your life? How can you be happy, whether it is genuine or situational, if you never focus on it? If you never focus on how good things are, you never have the ability to see and become aware of how wonderful things are, right? When we're focused on how bad things are, guess what? Happiness is not anywhere in the picture, situational or genuine. It's not even there. So you have to begin to really allow happiness to be a factor and a focus. And the last one is thinking that you need others or circumstances to change before you can be happy. This is a very bad limiting belief. It is a limiting thought. It is a limiting feeling. It is a limit all the way around, right? Happiness is not dependent on someone else being in your life. I see this so often where women will say, without that person, without my children, without X, Y, and Z, I could not possibly be happy. And that's not true. Happiness is soul bound. It's within you. You create happiness in the things that you do, yes, in your connections. However, your soul happiness cannot be dependent on how someone else is or how they show up in your life or having a certain set of things. It cannot be in something that is removable, right? If the only way you experience happiness is with a partner and say that partner passes away, what happens to your happiness? Does it pass away too? And many times it does. And it is a shame. Of course, we go through loss and we have to grieve and all of the things. But if we can look at happiness as being an internal factor, we can shift these habits and begin to really live a life of true, genuine happiness, right? Happiness based on someone else is situational. We want true, genuine happiness. If that's the goal, if that's what we want, we have to ask ourselves, how do we get there? If you're familiar with the podcast with me, you know my famous 4 questions. What do I want? How do I want to feel? What do I need? And how am I going to get there? And we really can get there by starting to shift out of these habits that keep us from our happiness. And so let's talk about what we have to do in order to shift. And the first thing is to create your definition of happiness. Remember in the very beginning, I asked you, when was the last time you asked yourself, am I really happy? If you were able to answer that yes or no, that also means that you actually have some definition of what happiness means to you. And so we have to ask ourselves that question. What does happiness mean to me? What would it take for me to be truly happy? Not situationally happy, but truly, genuinely happy. If you know what that definition is, it's very imperative to write it down. Here's also something that you should know. Every time that you grow or you move into a new phase, it's very likely that your definition changes too. So if you give yourself a little bit of space and a little bit of permission to change that definition as you grow and change, then you really begin to have a true focus of what happiness is. So the first thing you have to do is to create your definition of happiness. What does happiness mean to you? What are the elements of happiness? Not the Google definition, not the dictionary definition, but what does happiness mean to you specifically? Your definition and my definition are going to look very different, and that's okay. I just want you to give yourself permission to begin to focus and to know what that definition is. With your definition in hand, I want you to try to identify how many things are active in your daily life that meet that definition. We do not do this enough. This is a true exercise that should be done, like I said, about every 6 months or even every 2 months if you're in a big shift and change period in your life. You know, how many of these things meet my current definition? How many of these things really do help me be happy and help me create a greater sense of genuine happiness? And then I want you to think about your mindset, right? This is so important. What is active in your mindset? Is it the negative things, or are you able to commit to yourself and live within your definition? When it comes to happiness, you have to understand that you actually live by your own design, not a default happiness, not some random movement in your life, but truly what's happening in your mindset. This is your design. If your mindset's really positive, guess what? Your design is going to be better. With that, with your definition in hand, we begin to really get down to, as the saying goes, brass tacks. And we begin to really look at how we create that long-term happiness. This self-guided exploration becomes your focus. So with that definition, you begin to ask yourself, what do I want within my definition? So my definition of happiness is fulfillment in all areas of my life, meeting those 5 masters, the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and financial health. And it includes practices of how I show up in my life as a human, as a wife, as a daughter, as a mother, as a therapist, as a parent, all of the things, right? How I show up. And then we go deeper with that. You know, how do I want to live my life through those things that I want in my definition? We can even go a step further than that and say, if we had to boil everything down to essentials and nothing more, what would my definition look like? When you know, I want you to write it out. I want you to reread your answer. I want you to get so clear, just like you're clear about your definition. I want you to get clear about this space. What do I want within that definition? Because the definition overall is just sort of this overarching guide, right? This is sort of the end goal, the intention. But there's things, micro activities, micro thoughts, micro events, micro feelings that are in that definition. And it is the real space of how you get there, right? And when you have that answer and you've reread it and it's locked in, I want you to then ask yourself, is this really what emphasis on the what I want? Often, like I mentioned in the very beginning, we give of ourselves and we really try to make other people happy, whether that's from our parents to our spouses to the people around us, our bosses. And when we do that, we give away our genuine happiness. We think that the situation will be served if we allow other people's happiness to trump our own. It's not true. You will never feel happy at someone else's expense. I'm going to say that again. You're never going to truly feel happy and fulfilled at someone else's expense. Please remember that. Your true answer of what it is that you really want